for joining us today. I'm really excited to introduce you to my best friends who have arrived from all over the country to model the Flatiron jackets and coats that they've made, and a few that we have here as well. So this is going to be a really fun little trunk show, fashion show, inspirational show. We're going to talk style, we're going to talk pattern, we're going to talk fabric, and we're going to talk about some techniques as well. This is the Flatiron as a coat. I have it on as the short length, the jacket length. The coat has, and the jacket, both have these very splayed out collars, or you can wear it completely closed up, buttoned or tied or pinned in some way. But I like the way the various fabrics differ in how they drape. So that's just sort of the nature of the garment. It has large pockets, smaller pockets on the jacket version, larger pockets on the coat version. Lots of good overlap. A little more extended overlap on the coat rather than the jacket. The jacket has a little less overlap. If you choose to button it, great. We also have some snaps that are incredible to use. And this one has 3 snaps. Believe it or not, it just takes 3 snaps. Not 4, not 2, but 3. But it's generous enough that you can wear sweaters underneath it, another coat if you need to. You can even make it in a rainwear type fabric and wear it over another coat. So it's a really versatile, great coat. And if you live in the part of the world where you need coats, this is your coat for the year. And we're already thinking about it here in Kansas because it's beginning to be October and the cool weather is coming, and we're feeling the need for that great all-purpose coat. All right, so hopefully everybody can hear me now.
I know we have some people saying still hard to hear, and some people saying it's great.
Well,
so you could try speaking louder.
I'll speak louder. Is that? Maybe I'll try speaking louder. All right. We can't explain why. We can't explain all the technology problems that go along with this Facebook Live thing. So, sorry. All right. Let's start with Cindy. We have some people here for the beginning of our So Kansas event, which starts today. And Cindy is from, and I always forget whether you're Mississippi or Alabama.
Mississippi. Gulf Coast.
Gulf Coast, Mississippi. How often do you wear a coat?
Not as often as I would like to, living on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Maybe the months of January and February.
All right. But you didn't make this coat.
No.
You put it on when you arrived. It's in a wonderful two-sided wool. So she loved it because of the color, and it looks great on her, of course. It's fuchsia pink. The back side of the fabric was this wonderful blue gray. But if you were to make it for your climate, how do you see it? Would you make the long one or the short one?
I would probably make the short one, and I've been thinking about, while I'm here, this out of denim.
Oh, out of denim. I think that's a great idea. Would you wash it first and soften it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any top stitching details?
Maybe
contrasting? Yeah. Okay. I made one in a two-sided denim last year, so that when it turns back, you see the wrong side, the lighter side, and that's one of the great things about denim is it looks great on both sides.
Right.
So give us the model twirl.
The model.
The model twirl. So you have the big pockets.
Yes.
On the coat. This one doesn't have any closures to it. This is just really a wrap.
Very comfortable.
Either we never bothered to put the snaps on and forgot, or it was on purpose. I can't remember. So, looks great. You look fabulous in that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Linda, who is coming in this incredible red. I'm going to give you this. That's your little microphone. All right. Well, okay. So tell us about what you did with the raw edge and what inspired you and what you're wearing with it and the whole thing.
Okay, well, you inspired me.
Oh, well.
Okay. And you helped me choose this fabric to go with it to take on London
last year. She went on the London
trip last year, so I made it special for that. As far as the raw edges, I didn't do anything. I think I did stitch close to the edge.
Yeah, sometimes when we do a raw edge, we'll stitch about 3/8 of an inch from the edge with a normal stitch length, just to give it a little bit of finish that not everybody can handle the absolute raw edge. You have to do something to it. But it does stabilize it a little bit, and some raw edges over time can begin to sort of wave or stretch out, so that stitching becomes a stay stitch line, and it does kind of stabilize things, and I think it makes it look nice. Now see how her collar is lying flat, although I suppose, if you did that, it doesn't. So you could wear a scarf with that.
Yes, yes. And I like, you mentioned that, how nice it is that you can put things under it. In our world, in the winter, it gets cold and we wear layers. And it's nice to have something that you can put over and go out and still not feel all closed
bulky.
up. Yeah, yes.
That's right. Linda and Cindy and two others who you're going to meet all were on the London textile tour a year ago, April. And as many of you know, we had an April trip that was scheduled for this last April that has been postponed until a year from September. So September 2021. We do have a couple of openings if you're interested in joining us for London a year from now. And if you're interested in talking with me about it, either email me or give me a buzz on the phone, and I can give you all the details and what we're going to do. Did you enjoy yourself?
I loved it. Yes, it was great. I loved it.
Good, thanks. I was hoping you would say that.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
All right.
Yeah.
Even though one day you had
Yeah.
didn't feel so well one day, but that wasn't anything other than just life.
Yes.
So anyway,
Okay.
thank you. The beautiful color on you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Rhonda was also on the London Textile Tour. So all these gals have become friends. That's one of the great things about sewing, is that people meet in our France workshops at Chateau de Ma or on our London textile tours, or they come to Topeka to our Sew Kansas events. They meet each other, and they stay connected. They find where each other lives. You're from Houston, and so now she's friends with people from South Carolina and everywhere.
I know, and Cindy is my sister.
And Cindy is your sister, that's right.
Yes.
So you made this.
I did.
And
I took it to London.
yes.
And I did do, if you can see it, some
Hong Kong finishes. She used, it looks like silk dupioni to cover the raw edges on the insides of those seams. That's a
Yes.
beautiful detail.
I kind of put the pockets on a little diagonal here.
Is that because you didn't want to match them, or you like
Yes,
the idea?
if you really want to know.
Well, it's a great.
No, it's a style.
Yeah,
It's-
exactly.
yes.
Well, it's a great detail.
I like-
I'm seeing that a lot on a lot of garments today. A lot of the runway garments, from Gucci to Dolce & Gabbana, they're all these mixed patterns with bias and horizontal and vertical and all of that. And it's really great. Now, this was a fabric that obviously didn't look good raw.
No.
It raveled incorrectly.
Yes, and I didn't want to serge it either. I didn't want that look on the inside, which is why I went with binding the seams.
And you did a traditional double-turned hem on the outside.
Right.
But you would say this is pretty easy to make?
Yes, it is.
It's a pretty quick sew.
It's a very quick sew.
So turn around here. You can see that it's longer in the back, shorter in the front. So it has that multi-level hem, which I like very much.
Mm-hmm.
Do you wear this in Houston?
I do.
Yeah, every once in a while?
1 or 2 days out of the year, yeah.
Well, you got to have a coat for those 1 or 2 days.
Yes, of
Absolutely.
course.
Well, it's beautiful, and the color's great on you as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, well, now, wait a minute. Come on back here. I forgot to ask Linda what else she had on the bottom, but you have on
I have
Picasso
pants. I don't know if they can
Maybe you can't see them, but
stick my leg up.
but that's a great style. I have on Picasso pants as well. In fact, I
love
was
them.
laughing this morning as I put on these Picasso pants in the black cotton and lycra. Would this be the 16th or the 20th time I've worn them on Facebook Live? I do have other pants, but apparently these are my favorites because they go on all the time. But it's a great style with the bell shape, lantern shape at the bottom to wear with this somewhat oversized drapey sort of jacket.
Uh-huh. And this is a T-shirt I actually purchased, but I wore it because I want us to figure out this little ruching detail, which shouldn't be hard.
This is the kind of thing we do in Sew Kansas, is we work on ideas that people bring from a picture or an actual garment, and we'll help them sort out how to do that on some of our patterns. So people come to Sew Kansas with various agendas, from just getting inspiration. They haven't maybe seen people very much in the last few months, and it's fun to sort of connect again with some sewers. They play off of one another. Some people just want fitting help. Some people just want to have some wardrobing inspiration, and they leave with a few patterns ready to go, with some fabric ready to go so they can sew at home. Other people are sewing like mad while they're here. So it's all over the board, and all levels of sewing as well. So that's what we like about So Kansas. We get a lot of things. I learn more from So Kansas than I'm sure the students do as well. So,
That's hard to believe.
well, no,
but-
it is. I think teachers learn more than students sometimes.
Well, you're right. As a
teacher of nursing,
mhm,
yes.
yeah.
Exactly. All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
next.
Hand me that microphone or hand it to the next person.
Okay, here you go.
All right. And this is Nancy Kane from Tulsa. Nancy and I go back a long way. Nancy owned the most fabulous fabric store in Tulsa. Amazing. We all mourn its closing. She closed it a few years ago, actually. But she and Debbie, her partner, owned the store. And I first met you when you asked me to come down and teach at the store. Or maybe I knew you before that. I can't remember.
I think we had crossed paths a time or two
maybe
before
we
that
had.
in
But
the sewing world.
Exactly. So Tulsa's only 4 hours away from me, so I would drive to Tulsa and teach for 2 or 3 days, and I met all your fabulous customers and shopped in the store and so forth. So Nancy's we've reconnected even since in the last couple of years. Nancy now drives up to see me, but she's a fabulous sewer, of course, and knows her fabrics. Probably has a couple of things left over from the store, I'm not sure.
Could be.
Could be. But your stash might be significant, but who cares? There's
Right.
always room for another piece.
Exactly. Yes.
So
Absolutely.
you haven't made the flat iron.
I haven't made the flat iron, but I certainly will be making flat iron before long. For one thing, it's a pattern I haven't made yet. So,
One of the few.
Right. So I always like to be able to check everything off my list. And the other thing is it has pockets. Oh, love pockets.
Yeah. We're going to be doing a Facebook Live in the future on this sort of fabric. This is the rayon and wool boucle that we have so many colors of, and we do overlapping seams, and that's a whole other little talking session that we're going to have. But that's a great color on you, and I actually remember buying this fabric from you.
I remember you buying white.
Yes, and I
Wool.
made a West End top out of it, but I first learned that I like this fabric by being in your store.
It's a wonderful fabric, and I've already been to the back checking out the colors that you have, and there's more than a couple back there.
There are 6, 7, 8 colors. I don't remember, but we've carried this fabric for years and tend to reorder it. Not always in the same color every time, but we do get it. So it's a real staple for us. What do you have underneath?
This is a T-shirt that I really don't. This is your fabric, and I have the Chesney pants.
Yes.
Which I liked making a lot, and they just fit right off the
pattern.
Yes.
The Chesney pants are one of the patterns, the third pattern that you get if you're a member of So Confident 2020. So it's a download pattern. It's one of the 4 patterns that you get for the year, and it is, I think, a really great fitting pant. So I'm glad you've made it. I'm glad to see it.
Made the other one that is wider at the bottom. What am I trying to say?
Either the Valencias,
No,
or the wider at the bottom.
that comes with the zip.
The West End pants.
The West
yes,
End
those are
pants.
wide leg pants.
So I laid this pattern right on top of the West End pants, and my West End pants fitted nicely. So I laid the pattern on top of that, and it was the curve was very similar, and so I knew I could do it without trying it on.
Well, it's interesting you should bring that up because that is a progression of the same generation of pants for us. We went from the old Quincy, Ikena, West End to Chesney using essentially the same sloper. So if you have any of those patterns in your pattern stash, you likely could alter leg widths or add pockets or delete something or other and have the right fit. So you don't have to buy a new pants pattern every time, although we would appreciate it.
Of course.
But you don't have to. You know, it's a lot of times it's buying that 1 or 2 pants patterns that you can then change the widths and details on.
It saved me a lot of time, though, in figuring out how to make the pants look like the Chesney pants because I just could cut it and sew it.
That's right. Yeah, which is what we really like to do. When we all call ourselves sewers, what we don't realize is that we're all, first of all, fitters,
Definitely.
and then we get to sew a little bit at the end, so which is what we love the most. Some people really like the fitting process. Me, I get through that, and I don't like to cut out either. That's the other thing I don't like to do. But everybody likes to stitch. So
Exactly.
anyway, thank you. I'll take the yes.
One thing, everyone has concluded that the guest mic needs to be used the whole time. That yours isn't working.
Okay.
So if we can just use the guest mic, that would be great.
All right.
Just hold it.
We'll do it.
All right.
Interesting. Okay. Samantha, you've seen before. She was here a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, actually, doing the dress workshop.
Right.
And you have on one of the dresses, which we'll have to show in a minute. Yeah. But the coat. So, tell us about the coat.
This is my flat iron that I put a belt on to cinch it up.
Yep.
This fabric I got last year.
Yes.
But I see now you have some new fabric and some new colors, which I'm thrilled about. And I just mitered my corners. I didn't leave the raw edges. I just...
Yeah. The miters are not in the pattern.
Correct.
But we have miter techniques all over our patterns, including tutorials and other patterns. So surely you can find it. You've used the big snaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just tuck my belt in when I don't want, and...
So you made some belt loops for the sides and the back, center back. Looks good. So she's used the sort of brushed side of the fabric, I guess I'll call it, but you could use the other side. I think it's totally reversible. Yes. You could have made the coat reversible, but oh my.
No kidding.
Yeah, but who wants to bother with that? But you could have.
Fun, though.
Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah.
It's a great jacket, and then I'm wearing the Cityscapes dress that I made out of a woven.
Yeah.
Instead of the knit.
That looks fantastic.
So.
Because it's normally a long dress, and you shortened it.
And long sleeves, and I
long
shortened
sleeves,
it.
and she shortened the sleeves.
Yep. And
All
put
right.
a facing.
And put a facing.
Yeah.
A few little changes. Just a few little
But
changes.
not much. I mean, it's really that shape, that Cityscape shape that I liked, because it was able to hide.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. How's the sound going?
I think we're better.
All right. So this is Cathy, who you've also seen. Cathy Davis has worked here forever, longer than me.
No.
That's not quite right, but a long time. And we've collaborated on many, many, many projects over the years. And I know what you're thinking. You're going to love this coat, and you're going to love this fabric. We no longer have this fabric. I am so sorry. It is a great fabric, and it's really fun. But this coat was made last year, actually, and we had this fabric, and we can no longer get it, which is really too bad. So talk to me about, you made this one, and you made this one. So she made them differently, really, in terms of finishing and a few other little details.
Well, this coat could tolerate raw edge finish because it's rather almost like a Melton on one side, but there is a visible weave, but it doesn't ravel, so this was easy. Everything just went raw edge. You didn't have to think about it. You did have to think about matching the motif for the pockets, and but other than that, it just sewed up nicely.
Well, and this is, you can see here, down here, maybe you can get a little picture of this. The snap is sewn on, and the stitching is visible on the outside, which I think is a really cool detail.
It's a little cross X's to sew that snap on. Sometimes you can't figure out how to neatly sew a snap where the thread shows on the right side. And you'll see some retail people will do a little square on the right side, which I think is a little hard. My squares are always a little wonky. But this was a great idea. Linda did it, not me, with this little star. And I thought, oh, what a great idea to do that. So it's easier to get that straight than the other one.
All right, so what happened here?
Well, the first thing, before I ever cut anything, I stood at the cutting table and turned the fabric inside, outside several times because the one side is a little darker background with maybe a smaller motif, not quite as stripe looking. And then I turned this way and I thought, oh gosh, they're both great. I was at home, so I took a picture and sent it to Linda and made her choose what was the outside. So,
So her stripes match across the front, at the side seams. Cathy is really good at this.
well, matching the pocket. Remember when you had your motif matching Facebook Live several months ago, where you actually draw the motif on your pattern piece tissue and lay it through. So that does work. This one did ravel, so you had to think about finish on this. In most cases, I finished with a serger, which I did first of all in the back seam, and then I decided I didn't like that serger look. So I just went back in there and turned the serger stitching under and stitched again, so it looks like a little flat seam there. I turned twice I left the serging on the side. If I'd planned from the start, I might have done some Hong Kong finish. I think that would have been pretty. And then the hem, you do have to turn twice. It was too ravelly. You absolutely had to miter the corners, which was much easier than trying to turn the thickness of the fabric twice. I started to do that, and it didn't seem to want to go under the machine. I thought, well, I'll try a miter. You know, if you've done several miters, you can just miter a corner in 30 seconds without thinking. And this really did lie really flat, so I was happy with that. I increased this hem allowance on this a little bit because of the thickness of the fabric.
I think that's a really good point. The thicker the fabric, the less it wants to roll twice narrowly.
Right.
And a wider hem is probably
And
better.
this coat can handle a wider hem
Yeah.
on it all the way through. So anyway, it was
Yeah.
fun to do that.
Looks fantastic. So this has traditional seaming. The one she has on has overlapping,
Yes.
where one seam allowance is cut off and the other seam allowance is not cut off, and the overlapping seam comes up to the seam allowance and it's stitched down a couple of times. Both of these techniques are in the pattern, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, they are.
So we give you both options. We also give you options for leaving the edges raw and for finishing with hemming as well. And I'm going to talk to you in a minute about, in fact, I might have you just stay right here if you don't mind. You can hold this while I go get some techniques, because I want to talk about another option for finishing an edge.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Make Linda come out and show her swing tee.
All right.
We didn't
Can
see
you
it.
hold this and hold the mic? All right. Sorry about that.
Stationary, if that's okay.
Yeah, stationary.
Please.
Still. Okay. All right. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about an optional edge treatment. If you think that your fabric is too bulky, it doesn't look good hemmed, of course you've made your sample. When you've cut out the fabric, or even before you've cut out the fabric, you have your samples and your little squares of scraps, and you're going to do some testing. You're going to test all these seam finishes to determine ahead of time whether you want your Hong Kong finishes, or whether the serging is going to look great, or if you're going to turn that edge and top stitch it. You figure all of that out before you start. It's so interesting to me that most people, all of us, me included, just get right into it, and then we get in trouble and we're figuring out the engineering of things when in fact it's just a tiny bit too late. But here's an example of making a sample of an edge. So I like to use knit jerseys to bind an edge. So that's what this looks like. I like using stripes. It could be a solid, but knits make great bindings. So you start out with a strip of fabric, and you determine how wide you want the binding to be in the end. And so you do a little pre-wrapping to see how much fabric you really need and how wide you need to cut the strip. But right sides together, you're going to sew a seam allowance. In this case, it's about a fat 1/2 inch. I leave that. I don't trim, and then I can wrap the binding around the edge and then stitch in the ditch. And it makes a beautiful binding. We do this in our Chateau coat as an option. We even show you how to do a beautiful miter of this binding. So if you have the Chateau coat pattern, you have the technique for how to turn the corner on a binding like this. All right, so let's talk about the pocket a minute. This is one time where there's a pattern piece in the pattern that is actually for the pocket pressing template. We have a pattern piece to cut out the pocket out of fabric, and we have a pattern piece for cutting out the pocket out of tag board, which is basically a manila file folder. This is the pattern piece. So I use this pattern piece with some tracing paper and a tracing wheel to trace the outline of this pattern onto my tag board. And then I can cut out with a rotary cutter the template. Now I've learned that I want to fold this template in half so that when I'm cutting the curve, I'm cutting the same curve twice. I learned that the hard way because I would cut this curve and then I would try to cut this curve and this one would always be different, so I was shaving this one off to match this one, and pretty soon I didn't have any curves. And finally something occurred to me, oh, well, fold that in half, duh, and I have the same curve twice. Right or wrong, it's the same curve at least. So I've pre-hemmed the top of my pocket, and then I can slip this template into the hem. You can see the template does not have the seam allowances. So now I can go to my ironing board and simply use the edge of the template as the edge over which I am pressing and steaming the seam allowance of this pocket. And you'll get perfect curved corners every time. Okay, thank you.
I don't make a very good sandwich board.
That's all right. All right, I think we're going to look at some fabrics now. Does that work for you, Erin? We're trying something new today. Can you tell we're moving the camera around, and it's very scary. We're going to start at this end. So the coat that Samantha made was made out of one of these. It was actually this fabric right here that has the yarn laid parallel, sort of couched onto the surface of the fabric, and the reverse side is the brush side. So we have 3 colorways of this. This fabric is polyester and rayon. So if you're allergic to wool, but you want that woolly look, your fabric. So we have this colorway, this one in more fall earthy colors, but I love the idea of adding magenta and purple to earth tones. To me, that gives it a real kick. There's the couching side, and here's the brush side. And then we have this beautiful, this reminds me of something very southwest, southern, something, I don't know, just a different kind of climate perhaps. But this is the brush side, and this is the couched yarn side. And then we have this whole array of other fabrics here that I want to tell you about. You know, you don't always want a coat that has a lot of movement in the fabric, or you want something that will go with a lot of things. So I love this really deep, deep purple. It feels like a boiled wool. It is wool. I doubt if it's been boiled, but it has more of a sweater flavor to it. There is a smoother side, which is the actual right side of this fabric, amazingly enough, and we know that because it is a jersey, so it curls to the right side when stretched on the cross grain. But you could easily use the more fleece type side to it, but it's not a fleece like we talked about last week that feels very blankety. This has a beautiful boiled wool effect to it, and I think, but it has a lot of stretch to it as well. It'd make a great sweater coat, I guess I'll call it. This is the fabric that you've seen the Flatiron made in, and you've already seen that it has the 2 sides. One has more stripe than the other. This one is polyester. I think it's great what they've done with this polyester, and the next one as well, because they really do look like wool. They have the Pendleton type look to them, but they're in polyester. So the price is much better as well. They're not the high-end, super high-end blankets that Ralph Lauren uses, for example, in his $1,800 handbags. So we have this colorway and we have this colorway, which is also beautiful. These are stripes, but on the horizontal. I'm showing it here on the vertical because you're looking at it sitting vertically, but horizontal stripes, and then a little more subdued on this side because of the brushed effect. Again, I think you could use either side. This is a woven, not a knit. This is Cindy's favorite fabric. I think it's the one she might use. I don't know. But this has a needle felted, that's the word I'm looking for, needle felted effect to it. Again, a sweater knit. It is a sweater, meaning it's a knit. And this side has these raised motifs that look like they've been needle felted in these beautiful magentas and gold tones, purples. And then the back side, because it's been needle felted, also looks good and is flatter. I think you could use either side or allow one or the other sides to show, particularly on a Flatiron coat or jacket. The next one is, actually this is the one that Cindy said she liked, now that I look at this. So maybe this is the one she's going to use. This is a rather abstract, somewhat floral motif, but it has, there's probably a word for this weave and I don't know what it is, but the background has been shaved, so to speak, so you have a velvet-like fuzzy surface to it, and then the motifs are looped, so those have not been cut. So it's a cut, uncut affair on fabric. Again, it does look good on the back side, so you could use either side, but I don't know, the relief of this pattern on this is really fantastic, I think. Let's go above here a minute before I move too far away. This one is wool. It's a wool base in this incredible woven ikat pattern, jacquard pattern it would be. But this has a glaze, a very light glaze over the surface of it that just gives it that patina, makes it, I don't know, it gives it a finish that I really enjoy seeing. So I don't consider this metallic in any way. It does have some movement in the color when you are wearing the fabric, but I think it's a very interesting fabric. This is not particularly heavy. It is fairly lightweight. It is a wool blend, and when we get fabrics that say wool blend, we frankly have no idea what all is in it. We could burn it and maybe suspect if there's any poly in it or something, but it is primarily wool with something else in it. But the glaze is what I think makes the finish on that. We have another one of the bulky sweater knits. I think this might have to be my next Flatiron, actually. I love that mid-length duster length coat. Long sweater, I guess. It's funny, in Kansas, I remember growing up wearing boots for what seemed like 6 months a year, galoshes and puffy coats and hoods and gloves and muffs. Remember those? That ages me, doesn't it? But recently, in the last few years, I don't wear my winter coat as much, and so sometimes a heavy sweater is just perfect. And I think this is what this is going to be for me. Again, both sides look great. Then we have some more neutrals in charcoals and blacks. This one feels like a felted wool. It has a flat finish on both sides. It has this very subtle stripe in charcoal. Has a Melton-like felted finish to it. Really a nice coat. This would be something you would wear forever as a basic coat, but not super basic, if you know what I mean. This is the same sort of base fabric, a nice wool, but it has this interesting design that's been printed on it. These slash marks are this abstract, it's like artistic brushstroke design to it in a ever so slightly metallic design to it. But it's a nice sturdy wool and would make a great basic coat. We have two that are boiled wools. They're wool knits. one in charcoal. I have a coat out of this, and I don't know, this is the one I tend to put on a lot when I can't decide what else to wear. It's just, you know, you just put it on and it works. Put it with a great scarf, some colorful shoes, colorful bag, and you can go anywhere. I remember walking down windy Chicago last year in my dark charcoal wool knit coat. It was frigid, and I felt like I belonged in the city. It was wonderful. We had the same fabric in black, so charcoal and black in the same one. Now this is a real novelty piece. Both of these polka dots. This one is a blend. We're not sure what it is, but it has the pom-poms on it. And Samantha, who you just met, actually made a coat out of this. It's a fairly lightweight fabric, but she underlined it in a cotton knit. And so it added the right heft and flavor to it to make it into a nice feeling, comfortable, soft, cuddly coat. So it's really fun. And then we have another polka dot. Again, more of a felted type polka dot that has some of the fuzz more prominent on one side and a little bit less so on the other side. But both of these would be real statement coats, which I'm sort of into. All right, those are the fabrics, and they are all on sale. Every single one of them that you're looking at here. So, do we have questions?
Let's see. Yes, I'm sure we do. I know they've been asking a lot about the overlapping seams in the pattern. Can you talk maybe a little bit about the sale for a second while I address?
Yes, I'm going to tell you what's on sale this week, and then we'll talk about the raw edge construction just a little bit. All of these fabrics that you see on the back wall, including the one that's hanging up there, are 20% off for the next week. Now, this is what we have of this inventory. And for those of you who have been ordering along the way, you know that we do run out fairly quickly on some things. Some things we reorder and some things we don't. And I don't think we're going to be reordering any of these, probably. We have some pretty sufficient yardage of a lot of them, but just know that if you're interested in them, you might want to kind of get right on it, because they do tend to go pretty fast. I appreciate you people who watch this live, because then you are knowing about what's the promotions of the week right away, and you can do your shopping, so we appreciate that. The Flatiron pattern is a printed pattern and a digital pattern, and the printed version is $18 for the week, and the digital pattern is $15. That means download, of course. We do have some snaps. We have some wonderful large off-white pearl snaps that would be great on the Flatiron. We also have some smaller snaps that also would be great maybe more on the jacket. And we have those in gunmetal and antique brass and nickel. And all of those snaps are 20% off. The large dark snaps we have very few of, and I've placed an order. They come from overseas, they come from Europe, and we're waiting on that shipment. So if you don't see those large snaps right away on the website, just give us a week or two, and I'm sure they'll be here, and you can always order them later. And then we do have a tutorial called Raw Edge Construction. And that tutorial actually is taking you through the making of the opal jacket from start to finish. The opal jacket has been made in the rayon and wool boucle, and that's the fabric that's being demonstrated in the tutorial. But we talk about raw edge construction. So whether you're interested in the opal or not, I think you really would enjoy the techniques that are taught in that tutorial. It's called Raw Edge Construction. And again, that is eliminating, deleting the overlapping seam allowance, leaving the seam allowance from the underlap, and you mark the seam allowance on that underlap. Use a double-sided tape or a fusee web to fuse the overlapping seam to the marked line on the underlapping seam, press it down, sew it once or twice, and that's overlapping construction. But this particular garment does have our famous shoulder seam that turns a corner and goes into the neck seam. And that is a little technique right here that you might want to know about from that tutorial of how to do this seam as an overlapping seam. Okay.
So we had a couple questions about the reversible coat, and could you do that with some of these fabrics?
Yes, the question is, can we use a lot of these fabrics as reversible? And yes, I would say every single one of these could be used as on the reverse, or use both sides, incorporate both sides, or reverse them, or make the coat reversible. So you could have either way. I've never done that, and I know that there would be some engineering to think about, particularly at the neckline and all that, but with a little bit of time and effort, I'm sure that could be worked out.
How would you finish the seams if you were to do that?
Well, that's the question. I would tend to do, overlapping seams. The question was, how do you finish the seams when you're doing a reversible garment? The overlapping seam is the perfect seam technique because it looks the same on the wrong side as the right side. And so it should work everywhere, including the neck. But I would have to take a look at that connection to see if there was a little split that would show up on one side in this corner. I suspect that there would be, and that might have to be dealt with in terms of an embellishment or a little different tucking in or something. That's what I'm not sure about. But other than that, seam allowance-wise, that overlapping seam, if the fabric allows it, makes the perfect seam allowance for a reversible coat. Otherwise, you can use flat fell seams. You can, I think that Hong Kong finishes are beautiful enough to put on the outside of a garment sometimes. So if you Hong Kong finished with silk du Peony or crepe de chine or something like that, and did them beautifully and sort of narrow, that would be a nice technique to see outside or inside.
So when you're doing the overlapping seams, is that what you'd recommend for the heaviest wools?
Would I recommend the overlapping seams for the heaviest wools? Yes, if the fabric doesn't ravel. If the fabric ravels, then you're probably going to do what Cindy did, which is to do a Hong Kong finish, or what Cathy did on the other coat, where she serged the edges and turned the edges and top stitched it. I think you're going to have to make your samples to see what's going to look best.
Okay, what length are the sleeves?
What length are the sleeves? They are full-length sleeves. I happen to have mine rolled up, but they are, well, I will say this, on the coat, sometimes some people lengthen the sleeve. They're a little bit of a 7/8 on the coat. On the jacket, they're more full length. And the sleeves on the jacket are a little more tapered, and the sleeves on the coat are a little wider.
The length on the coat, what's your preferred length? Is it the jacket, the coat, or somewhere in between?
What's my preferred length of the coat, the short or the long? That is entirely dependent on the fabric that I use. I certainly wear this is a throw-on at the office jacket for me, so the short one works for me. But as an outerwear coat, I want the long one.
Is the fabric above you, is that metallic?
Is the fabric above me metallic? This is a glaze, a little bit of a glistening glaze that is on the surface of this fabric. It is not on the reverse side. So it's not woven with a metallic thread. It is a surface finish.
And then the other one that has the metallic squiggles, what's the wrong side look like?
The wrong side is totally plain. No squiggles on the wrong side of this fabric.
But you could use that when the wrong
You could
side
use,
shows.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. The one that Cathy made, what type of seam did she use?
Cathy, can you come in here? Cathy has it on again. She loves modeling her own work. So we need to talk about the seams again. So the side seams of this garment have been serged. The edges have been serged with a 3-thread serge, and then the seam is pressed open. The back seam is same thing, she serged the edges, but then she turned the edges to the inside and edge stitched. So there's 2 rows of stitching. So it's a seam. We're going to try, why don't you walk closer?
I just like the finish. You know, when a coat's hanging on a hanger, it has much better finished look without that serging showing. If you were doing like a black coat, a black serging would be just fine. But you can see on the side seams here, they have not been turned. They could be. I didn't because it's not showing so much. So there is quite a bit of difference in the fineness of the finish between just the serge and then the serge and turn.
And then you are wearing another coat. Can you bring that one up? What are you wearing? I guess they want to know the other one.
All right, she's going to model the other one, which has the raw edge and overlapping seams, so we can show the difference between the seam finishes of this one and the seam finishes of the other one, because it's the same pattern, same coat, just the techniques are different.
Okay, we'll show it on the back seam. And you can tell there's 2 rows of stitching. This lighter color is lapped over the other side, and the first stitching you would do would be right next to the raw edge, which is easier than you think. You know, it's kind of forgiving. Sometimes your stitches kind of meld into it. People think, oh, I can't stitch that close, but you can. And then another one, again, about 3/8 of an inch away. So this is the underlap, this side's overlapped.
Okay. And then they also are curious about your blouse you're wearing, Cathy. So tell us all about it.
I couldn't get it off fast enough to model. Oh, this is the Zen shirt. The Zen shirt has a traditional left over right, like a man's shirt. It has a hidden placket. What I love about it is the 2 collars. And it's an easy collar. You don't have to do a collar stand. Like a lot of people fight that little corner on the collar stand. And these are just a mix of vintage kimono fabrics. The pattern is now in Zen. If you're looking it up, it won't be under the Z's, it will be under the N. Thank you. Anything?
That's it.
Thank you.
Is that all the questions?
I think so.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.